The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of ESPN's flagship studio in Bristol, Connecticut. It was going to be another busy day at the network, but nobody could have predicted just how memorable this particular Tuesday would become. The production team had been preparing for weeks for this interview, knowing that having Caitlin Clark on the show would bring in massive viewership numbers. Caitlin had arrived at the studio early, just like she always did for everything in her life. Growing up in Iowa, her parents had taught her the value of being punctual and prepared. She sat in the green room, sipping her morning coffee and scrolling through her phone. The messages from family and friends were pouring in, all wishing her luck for the interview. Her younger brother had sent her a funny meme about being famous, which made her smile and helped calm her nerves. The makeup artist worked quietly, adding just enough touch-ups to make Caitlin camera ready. They chatted about basketball, and the artist mentioned how her teenage daughter was a huge fan. These moments always reminded Caitlin of why she loved what she did. It wasn't just about the records or the trophies. It was about inspiring young people to chase their dreams just like she had done growing up in a small Iowa town. Meanwhile, Elle Duncan was in her office reviewing her notes one final time. She had been with ESPN for several years and had conducted hundreds of interviews with athletes from every sport imaginable. Her wall was decorated with photos from various events and interviews, showing her journey through sports journalism. She had built a reputation for asking tough questions, sometimes catching athletes off guard with unexpected angles. The production crew was buzzing with activity. Camera operators checked their equipment twice, lighting technicians adjusted angles to get the perfect setup, and sound engineers tested microphones to ensure crystal clear audio. Everyone knew this interview would be watched by millions of people. Caitlin Clark had become one of the most recognizable names in sports, and her college basketball career had broken viewership records across the country. In the weeks leading up to this interview, social media had been filled with speculation about what topics would be covered. Fans were excited to hear about Caitlin's future plans, her thoughts on women's basketball, and maybe some behind-the-scenes stories from her incredible college journey. The anticipation was building, and ESPN's social media team had been promoting the interview heavily. Caitlin's agent had briefed her on what to expect. They had discussed potential questions about her record-breaking performances, her impact on women's sports, and her transition into professional basketball. Everything seemed straightforward. These were the kinds of conversations Caitlin had been having with reporters for months. She felt confident and relaxed, ready to share her story with the world. The studio itself was impressive, with its sleek design and state-of-the-art technology. The interview area was set up with 2 comfortable chairs positioned at the perfect angle for the cameras. Behind them, large screens displayed ESPN logos and graphics that would change throughout the show. The lighting created a warm, professional atmosphere that made guests feel at ease while still maintaining the polished look viewers expected from the network. As Caitlin made her way from the green room to the studio, she thought about how surreal this whole experience had become. Just a few years ago, she was a teenager playing basketball in her high school gymnasium, dreaming of maybe getting a college scholarship. Now she was walking through the halls of ESPN, about to be interviewed on national television. The journey had been incredible, filled with challenges that had made her stronger and victories that had exceeded her wildest dreams. Elle Duncan was known for her engaging interview style. She had a way of making athletes comfortable, while still asking the questions that viewers wanted answered. Her colleagues respected her work ethic and her ability to handle live television with professionalism. She had interviewed everyone from rookie players to Hall of Fame legends, and each conversation brought its own unique challenges and rewards. The technical rehearsal went smoothly. Both women tested their microphones, the cameras captured perfect angles, and the lighting created exactly the right mood. The director gave everyone final instructions, reminding them about timing and commercial breaks. This was live television, so there would be no second chances or do-overs. Everything had to work perfectly from the moment they went on air. Caitlin adjusted her blazer and checked her appearance one last time in the monitor. She had chosen her outfit carefully, wanting to look professional while still being true to her personal style. Her mother had helped her pick out the outfit during a shopping trip the previous week, and they had laughed about how strange it was to be choosing clothes for a national television appearance. The makeup team did final touch-ups on both women, ensuring they would look perfect under the bright studio lights. The hairstylist made small adjustments, and the wardrobe supervisor checked that everything was sitting properly. These details might seem small, but they were crucial for creating the polished look that viewers expected from a major network interview. As the countdown began, the energy in the studio shifted. Everyone took their positions, from the camera operators to the sound technicians. The director's voice came through their earpieces, giving them updates on timing and reminding them they were about to go live to millions of viewers across the country. Caitlin took a deep breath and settled into her chair. She had done dozens of interviews throughout her college career, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the prestige of being on ESPN, or maybe it was the knowledge that so many people would be watching. Either way, she felt ready to share her story and connect with the audience. Elle Duncan shuffled through her notes one final time, organizing the questions in her mind. She had prepared extensively for this interview, researching Caitlin's background, her achievements, and the impact she had made on women's basketball. The plan was to cover her college career, discuss her future goals, and maybe touch on some of the broader issues facing women's sports. The studio fell silent as the final countdown began. Red lights on the cameras indicated they were about to go live. The director held up his fingers, counting down from 5 to 1. At that moment, everything seemed perfect. Two professional women, prepared for what should have been a standard but engaging sports interview. Neither of them could have imagined that in just a few minutes, this routine interview would become one of the most talked about moments in sports media history. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and what happened next would be replayed and discussed for years to come. The basketball world was watching, social media was ready to explode, and two careers were about to intersect in a way that nobody saw coming. The red recording light flickered on, and Elle Duncan's professional smile appeared instantly. She had done this thousands of times before, but there was something different about today. The cameras captured her perfectly as she delivered her opening remarks, introducing Caitlin Clark to the millions of viewers who had tuned in specifically for this interview. Caitlin smiled warmly at the camera, then turned her attention to Elle. She felt comfortable and confident, just like she did before stepping onto the basketball court. This was her element now, talking about her sport, her journey, and her dreams for the future. The studio lights were bright but not overwhelming, and the familiar hum of television production created a strangely calming background noise. The first few minutes went exactly as everyone expected. Elle asked about Caitlin's incredible college career, and Caitlin responded with genuine enthusiasm. She talked about her teammates, her coaches, and the incredible support she had received from fans across the country. Her voice carried the same passion that had made her such a compelling player to watch on the court. The conversation flowed naturally as they discussed record-breaking performances and memorable games. Caitlin's eyes lit up when she talked about specific moments from her college career. She described the feeling of hitting that crucial three-pointer in the final minutes of a championship game, and how the crowd's roar had given her chills that lasted for hours afterward. Elle nodded along, asking follow-up questions that showed she had done her homework. The interview was going smoothly, hitting all the points that viewers wanted to hear about. Social media was already buzzing with positive comments about how well-spoken and genuine Caitlin appeared on camera. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But then something shifted in Ella's demeanor. It was subtle at first, a slight change in her posture, a different tone in her voice. The production crew, who had been relaxed and confident just moments before, began to sense that something was different. The camera operators exchanged quick glances, though they kept their equipment focused perfectly on both women. Caitlin noticed the change too, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what was happening. Ella's questions started to take on a different edge, moving away from the celebratory tone that had characterized the first part of the interview. There was something in Elle's expression that hadn't been there before, a look that suggested she was building up to something bigger. The veteran interviewer reached for her notes, flipping through a few pages with deliberate slowness. This wasn't part of the natural flow of conversation anymore. It felt calculated, almost theatrical. Caitlin maintained her pleasant expression, but inside she felt a flutter of uncertainty. Her media training had prepared her for tough questions, but this felt different somehow. Elle looked up from her notes with what could only be described as a loaded smile, the kind of expression that suggested she was about to drop a bombshell that would change the entire direction of the conversation. The studio, which had been filled with the easy energy of a successful interview, suddenly felt charged with tension. The sound technicians adjusted their equipment slightly, making sure they would capture every word of what was about to unfold. The director in the control room leaned forward in his chair, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Years of experience in live television had taught him to recognize these moments when interviews took unexpected turns. Caitlin shifted slightly in her chair, maintaining her composure, but preparing herself mentally for whatever was coming next. She had learned through years of competitive basketball that you couldn't control what your opponents would throw at you, but you could control how you responded. That mindset was about to be tested in a way she had never experienced before. Elle cleared her throat and leaned forward slightly, creating a more intimate and intense atmosphere. The camera operators instinctively adjusted their angles to capture both women's expressions more clearly. Everyone in the studio could feel that they were about to witness something extraordinary, though none of them knew exactly what that would be. The question, when it finally came, landed like a thunderbolt in the pristine studio. Ella's words cut through the air with surgical precision, completely shattering the comfortable atmosphere that had defined the first part of the interview. The question was so unexpected, so far removed from anything that had been discussed or prepared for, that it left everyone in the studio momentarily stunned. Caitlin's face showed the progression of emotions in real time. First came surprise. Her eyebrows raised slightly as she processed what she had just heard. Then came confusion, as she tried to understand why this particular question was being asked in this context. Finally, her expression settled into something that looked like controlled determination, the same look she had worn during the most challenging moments of her basketball career. The production team watched in fascination and growing concern. This wasn't the softball interview they had been expecting. The question had implications that went far beyond sports, touching on sensitive topics that could potentially create controversy for everyone involved. The director found himself torn between his journalistic instincts and his concern for maintaining the network's reputation. Elle sat back in her chair after delivering the question, watching Caitlin's face carefully. There was something almost predatory in her gaze, as if she was studying her subject's reaction to see how she would handle this unexpected challenge. It was the look of someone who had deliberately chosen to go off script in pursuit of a more dramatic moment. The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever, though it was probably only a few seconds. In the world of live television, those seconds felt like an eternity. The camera captured every micro-expression on both women's faces, and viewers across the country found themselves leaning forward in their chairs, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Caitlin's mind raced as she processed not just the question itself, but all of its implications. She thought about her family watching at home, about her former teammates who would see this interview, about the young girls who looked up to her as a role model. The weight of her response felt enormous, and she knew that whatever she said next would be analyzed and discussed for a long time to come. The studio lights seemed brighter now, the cameras more invasive. What had started as a routine sports interview had transformed into something much more significant. Ella's question had changed the entire dynamic of the conversation, creating a moment that would soon become legendary in the world of sports media. The tension in the room was palpable, as everyone waited to see how Caitlin Clark would respond to this unexpected challenge. Her years of handling pressure on the basketball court had prepared her for difficult moments, but this was different. This was about more than just winning or losing a game. This was about defending her character and her values on national television, in front of millions of people who had tuned in to hear about her basketball career. The stage was set for what would become one of the most memorable exchanges in sports interview history. Two strong women, facing off in a moment that neither had fully anticipated, with the entire sports world watching and waiting to see what would happen next. The moment Caitlin began to speak, everyone in the studio knew they were witnessing something special. Her voice was calm at first, almost eerily controlled, like the quiet before a storm. She looked directly at Ellie, not with anger, but with the kind of focused intensity that had made her such a formidable competitor on the basketball court. She started by taking a deep breath, the same way she used to do before taking crucial free throws in packed arenas. The studio was so quiet you could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning system. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath, sensing that history was about to be made right in front of their eyes. Caitlin's opening words were measured and precise. She thanked Elle for the question, which caught everyone off guard. There was no immediate defensiveness, no emotional outburst that many people might have expected. Instead, she approached the moment with the same strategic mindset that had helped her break countless basketball records throughout her college career. Her response began with facts, cold hard statistics that she delivered with the precision of someone who had spent years studying game film and analyzing performance data. She talked about her shooting percentages, her assist numbers, her impact on team victories. But these weren't just random numbers thrown out to fill time. Each statistic was carefully chosen to build a foundation for what was coming next. The production crew found themselves leaning in, captivated by the transformation they were witnessing. This wasn't the same young woman who had been making comfortable small talk just minutes earlier. This was someone who had found another gear, tapping into a level of focus and determination that reminded everyone why she had been so successful as an athlete. Elle's confident expression began to shift as Caitlin continued speaking. What had started as what seemed like a routine statistical response was clearly building towards something much more significant. The interviewer's body language changed subtly. She sat up straighter in her chair, no longer leaning back with the casual confidence she had displayed when asking her provocative question. Caitlin moved seamlessly from statistics to personal experiences, sharing specific moments from her career that directly addressed the implications behind Elle's question. She talked about late nights in the gym, working on her craft when nobody was watching. She described the dedication required to maintain her academic performance while carrying the pressure of being the face of her team's success. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, but never louder. There was something incredibly powerful about her controlled delivery that made every word hit with maximum impact. She talked about the teammates who had supported her journey, the coaches who had believed in her potential, and the family members who had sacrificed to help her reach her dreams. The camera captured every subtle change in both women's expressions. Caitlin's confidence seemed to grow with each sentence, while Elle appeared increasingly uncomfortable. The tables had completely turned from just a few minutes earlier, when Elle had seemed to hold all the power in the conversation. What made Caitlin's response so devastating wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. She never raised her voice or showed anger. Instead, she dismantled each assumption embedded in Elle's question with surgical precision, using logic and evidence that was impossible to argue against. It was like watching a masterclass in communication under pressure. She addressed the broader context of women's sports, talking about the challenges that female athletes face and the responsibility that comes with being in the spotlight. But she didn't present herself as a victim. Instead, she positioned herself as someone who had overcome obstacles through hard work and determination, making Elle's question look petty and misguided by comparison. The director in the control room was furiously taking notes, knowing that this segment would be replayed countless times in the days and weeks to come. The technical crew was doing their job with automatic precision, but their attention was completely focused on the drama unfolding in front of the cameras. Caitlin began incorporating specific examples from games and tournaments, describing moments when she had faced adversity and responded with excellence. She talked about playing through injuries, dealing with intense pressure from opposing crowds, and maintaining her composure in the biggest moments of her career. Each example served to highlight the strength of character that Elle's question had seemed to challenge. Her response showed incredible emotional intelligence as she acknowledged the difficulty of being in the public eye while still maintaining her dignity and grace. She talked about the young girls who looked up to her and how important it was to set a positive example, even in challenging situations. This wasn't just about defending herself anymore. It was about representing something bigger. The power dynamic in the studio had completely reversed. Elle, who had started the interview as the confident veteran journalist, now looked like someone who was desperately trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her expectations. Her notes sat forgotten in her lap as she watched Caitlin deliver what could only be described as a masterpiece of live television. Caitlin's voice carried the weight of genuine conviction as she talked about the values that had guided her throughout her life. She mentioned her parents, who had taught her the importance of treating people with respect and dignity. She talked about her faith, her commitment to excellence, and her determination to use her platform for positive change. The most remarkable aspect of her response was how she managed to address Elle's question without ever seeming bitter or resentful. She maintained a level of professionalism that made her seem incredibly mature and wise beyond her years. Every word was chosen carefully, every pause was perfectly timed, and every gesture reinforced the strength of her message. As Caitlin continued speaking, it became clear that this wasn't just a response to one inappropriate question. This was a statement about who she was as a person, what she stood for, and how she planned to conduct herself throughout her career. She was setting boundaries and establishing her identity on her own terms, in front of a national audience. The social media team at ESPN was probably already receiving notifications about the incredible response happening online. Viewers were posting clips and quotes in real time, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The interview had transformed from a routine sports segment into a cultural moment that would be remembered for years to come. Elle made a few attempts to interject or redirect the conversation, but Caitlin's momentum was unstoppable. She had found her rhythm and was delivering her message with the same relentless precision that had made her such a dominant force on the basketball court. Every word built upon the previous one, creating an argument that was both powerful and impossible to refute. The studio lights seemed to spotlight Caitlin's strength and composure as she reached the crescendo of her response. She had taken what was meant to be a moment of vulnerability and transformed it into a demonstration of incredible character and resilience. The young woman who had walked into the studio that morning had revealed herself to be someone truly special, and everyone watching knew they would never forget what they had just witnessed. The silence that followed Caitlin's powerful response was deafening. For a few seconds, nobody in the studio seemed to know what to do next. Elle sat there looking stunned, her prepared follow-up questions suddenly seeming completely inadequate for the moment that had just unfolded. The confident interviewer who had started this conversation had been replaced by someone who appeared genuinely shaken by what she had just witnessed. The camera operators kept rolling, their professional instincts taking over even as they processed the incredible exchange they had just captured. In the control room, the director was already making mental notes about which angles had captured the most powerful moments. Everyone knew they had just recorded something that would be talked about for years to come. Caitlin sat back in her chair, her posture still confident but no longer tense. She had said what needed to be said, and now she waited to see how Elle would respond. There was something almost peaceful about her expression now, like someone who had just lifted a heavy weight off their shoulders. She had faced the challenge head-on and emerged stronger for it. Elle tried to regain her composure, shuffling through her notes as if looking for something that could help her navigate this unexpected situation. Her hands were slightly shaky, which the cameras picked up despite her attempts to appear calm. The veteran journalist had conducted thousands of interviews, but none had prepared her for this moment. Within minutes of the segment ending, social media exploded like nothing anyone had seen before. The ESPN social media team watched in amazement as their phones lit up with notifications. Twitter was flooded with clips of Caitlin's response, each one being shared and reshared at an incredible pace. The hashtag started trending almost immediately, with people from all walks of life weighing in on what they had just witnessed. The first wave of reactions came from fellow athletes. Basketball players, both men and women, posted their support for Caitlin's handling of the situation. Many praised her composure and the way she had stood up for herself without losing her dignity. Professional athletes understood better than Anyone the pressure of being in the spotlight and dealing with difficult questions from the media. Sports commentators and analysts began breaking down the interview segment by segment, analyzing not just what Caitlin had said, but how she had said it. Communication experts praised her delivery, noting how she had maintained eye contact, controlled her voice, and structured her response like someone who had studied public speaking for years. They pointed out that her response would likely be used as a teaching tool for athletes learning how to handle media pressure. The reaction wasn't limited to the sports world. People from completely different industries found themselves drawn to the story. Business leaders shared the clip as an example of grace under pressure. Teachers used it to show their students how to construct a logical argument. Parents pointed to it as an example of standing up for yourself with class and dignity. Ellie's colleagues at ESPN were having mixed reactions behind the scenes. Some felt that she had crossed a line with her questioning, while others defended her right to ask tough questions as a journalist. The network found itself in a difficult position, trying to balance their support for their employee with the overwhelming public criticism of her approach. The video clips were being dissected frame by frame on various platforms. People were analyzing body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Slow-motion replays showed the exact moment when Elle realized that her question had backfired spectacularly. Other clips focused on Caitlin's transformation from surprised to determined to triumphant. News outlets that normally didn't cover sports began picking up the story. Major newspapers, online publications, and television networks started running segments about the interview. The story had transcended sports and become a broader conversation about media responsibility, respect, and how public figures should be treated during interviews. College journalism professors were already planning to add this interview to their curriculum. The exchange provided perfect examples of both what to do and what not to do when conducting interviews with public figures. Students would be studying this footage to learn about preparation, respect, and the consequences of going off script without proper justification. Caitlin's phone was buzzing constantly with messages of support. Her family members were calling and texting to tell her how proud they were of the way she had handled herself. Her former teammates were sending encouraging messages, many saying they weren't surprised by her poise under pressure because they had seen her perform in clutch moments countless times before. The criticism of Elle was swift and intense. Many people felt that her question had been inappropriate and unprofessional. Journalists from other networks began discussing the importance of maintaining standards and treating interview subjects with respect, regardless of their celebrity status. The incident sparked broader conversations about the responsibility that comes with having a platform and an audience. Some defenders of Elle argued that tough questions were part of journalism and that public figures should be prepared to handle difficult inquiries. However, they were vastly outnumbered by those who felt that the question had crossed ethical boundaries and served no legitimate journalistic purpose. The ratings for the interview segment were through the roof. ESPN's website crashed temporarily due to the volume of people trying to watch the clip online. The network's social media accounts gained thousands of new followers as people wanted to stay updated on any follow-up coverage or statements from either party involved. Sports radio shows across the country were dedicating entire segments to discussing the interview. Call-in shows were flooded with listeners wanting to share their opinions about what had happened. The consensus was overwhelmingly in favor of Caitlin's response, with many callers praising her maturity and intelligence. Professional public relations experts were analyzing the situation from a crisis management perspective. Many noted that Caitlin had handled what could have been a career-damaging moment and turned it into a demonstration of strength and character. They predicted that the incident would actually enhance her reputation and marketability rather than harm it. The impact was being felt beyond just the immediate participants. Other sports media personalities began reviewing their own interview techniques, questioning whether they had ever crossed similar lines in their own careers. The incident served as a wake-up call for the entire industry about the importance of maintaining professional standards. Late-night television hosts were already preparing segments about the interview for their shows. Comedy writers were crafting sketches that would parody the exchange while still respecting Caitlin's powerful response. The story had all the elements that made for great television. conflict, resolution, and a clear hero and villain. As the day progressed, it became clear that this wasn't just going to be a brief social media sensation. The interview had tapped into broader cultural conversations about respect, professionalism, and standing up for yourself. People were sharing the video not just because it was entertaining, but because they found it genuinely inspiring. By evening, the story had reached international audiences. Sports fans around the world were watching the clips and reading about the American basketball player who had delivered such an impressive response under pressure. The interview was being translated into multiple languages and shared across global social media platforms. The aftermath was unlike anything anyone in sports media had seen before. What had started as a routine interview had become a cultural phenomenon, with Caitlin Clark emerging as an unlikely hero and Elle Duncan facing intense scrutiny for her role in creating the controversy. The sports world would never look at either of them the same way again. 6 months later, the impact of that fateful interview was still being felt across the sports world and beyond. Caitlin Clark had become more than just a basketball player. She had transformed into a symbol of grace under pressure and standing up for yourself with dignity. The young woman who had walked into that ESPN studio had emerged as one of the most respected voices in all of sports. Her professional basketball career had taken off in ways that exceeded everyone's expectations. Teams were not just interested in her athletic abilities anymore, but also in her character and leadership qualities. Sponsors lined up to work with someone who had demonstrated such poise and integrity in a difficult moment. Marketing executives recognized that Caitlin represented something special, an athlete who could handle pressure both on and off the court. The interview clip had been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms. It was being used in communication classes at universities around the country as an example of how to respond to unfair criticism with facts and dignity. Business schools were analyzing her response as a masterclass in crisis management and personal branding. The video had transcended sports and become a cultural touchstone. Caitlin received speaking invitations from corporations, universities, and youth organizations. Everyone wanted to learn from someone who had shown such remarkable composure in a challenging situation. She carefully selected the opportunities that aligned with her values, always focusing on inspiring young people to stand up for themselves and pursue their dreams with determination. Her social media following had grown exponentially, but more importantly, the quality of engagement had changed. Young athletes, both male and female, were reaching out to share their own stories of overcoming adversity. Parents were thanking her for being a positive role model for their children. Teachers were using her example to help students learn about responding to bullying and unfair treatment. The interview had also sparked important conversations within the sports media industry. ESPN and other networks had implemented new guidelines for interviews, emphasizing the importance of maintaining respect and professionalism even when asking challenging questions. Journalism schools began teaching courses specifically about ethical interviewing techniques, using that infamous exchange as a case study. Elle Duncan's career had taken a very different trajectory. The backlash from the interview had been swift and unforgiving. While some colleagues defended her right to ask tough questions, the overwhelming consensus was that she had crossed a professional line. She had taken a leave of absence from ESPN shortly after the incident, citing the need to reflect on her approach to journalism. When Elle eventually returned to television, her style had noticeably changed. She was more cautious in her questioning, more respectful in her approach, and clearly conscious of the lesson she had learned from that disastrous interview. Some viewers appreciated this new approach, while others felt she had lost some of her edge. The incident had fundamentally changed how she approached her job. The broader impact on sports journalism was significant. Reporters were more thoughtful about their questions, recognizing that the line between tough journalism and inappropriate behavior had real consequences. The days of ambush interviews and gotcha questions were becoming less common as the industry recognized the importance of maintaining professional standards. Caitlin's former college teammates often talked about how the interview had revealed something they had always known about her. They weren't surprised by her composed response because they had seen her handle pressure in big games with the same calm determination. Her college coach incorporated the video into team meetings, using it to teach players about representing themselves and their program with class. The incident had also influenced how athletes prepared for media interactions. Sports agents and public relations professionals began using Caitlin's response as a template for training their clients. They showed the video to demonstrate how to stay calm, stick to facts, and maintain dignity even when faced with unfair or inappropriate questions. Young girls around the country were especially inspired by Caitlin's example. The youth basketball programs reported increased participation, as girls wanted to emulate not just her athletic skills but her strength of character. Parents shared stories of their daughters standing up to bullies at school and citing Caitlin Clark as their inspiration for handling difficult situations with grace. The interview had become required viewing for anyone studying crisis communication or public relations. Marketing textbooks began including case studies about how Caitlin had turned a potentially damaging moment into a career-defining triumph. Business leaders referenced her response in meetings about handling difficult situations with customers or critics. Universities began inviting Caitlin to speak at graduation ceremonies, recognizing that her story represented important values about integrity, perseverance, and standing up for what's right. Her speeches always focused on encouraging young people to face challenges head-on and to never let anyone else define their worth or character. The ripple effects extended into popular culture as well. Late-night comedians had moved from making jokes about the interview to genuinely praising Caitlin's response. Musicians referenced her in song lyrics as an example of strength and authenticity. Authors wrote about her as a modern example of grace under pressure. Sports psychology experts studied the interview to understand how athletes could maintain composure in high-pressure situations. They noted that Caitlin's response demonstrated advanced emotional intelligence and mental toughness that went far beyond her basketball abilities. Her techniques were being taught to athletes in all sports as ways to handle media pressure. The interview anniversary became an annual reminder of the importance of treating people with respect and dignity. Sports media organizations used the date to recommit to ethical journalism practices. Many outlets published retrospective pieces about what the industry had learned from the incident and how it had changed their approach to interviewing athletes. Caitlin's endorsement deals reflected her enhanced reputation. Companies wanted to associate their brands with someone who represented integrity and strength of character. Her marketability had actually increased because of how she handled that challenging moment, proving that authenticity and grace could be more valuable than any manufactured controversy. The incident had also influenced how young athletes approached their own media training. They studied Caitlin's response to learn how to prepare for difficult questions and maintain their composure under pressure. Sports camps and academies began including media training as part of their programs, using her interview as the gold standard for handling adversity. Looking back, everyone involved recognized that those few minutes in an ESPN studio had changed multiple lives and careers forever. Caitlin had proven that character and integrity could triumph over cheap attempts at sensationalism. Ella had learned valuable lessons about the responsibility that comes with having a media platform. The sports world was better for what had happened that day. Standards had been raised, respect had been emphasized, and a young athlete had shown millions of people how to face adversity with dignity and strength. The interview that was meant to create controversy had instead created a lasting legacy of how to handle difficult moments with grace and class. Years later, when people talked about defining moments in sports media, that interview always came up. It represented a turning point when the industry recognized that athletes deserved to be treated with respect, and when one young woman showed the world what true strength and character looked like under the brightest lights and highest pressure.